All right, so let's dive right into the world after the 24 election. Specifically, a world where Donald Trump is back in the White House. You guys sent over some really interesting sources. We've got that electoral vote analysis, some actual legal documents, and even some pretty spicy political commentary to unpack. So think of this as your like super crash course on everything from how those electoral votes actually get counted to what Trump's legal battles and these kind of massive shifts in state legislatures could mean for, well, for all of us, really. Yeah, I mean, there's some pretty big questions here, right? Like, how much power does a president actually have to change things? Like birthright citizenship. What does the average American really want from their government? Are state legislatures becoming, like, more important than what happens in Washington? Buckle up, because this is going to be a wild ride. So first things first, let's talk about how we actually get from election day to a new president, being sworn in. I got to admit, digging into this whole process is way more complex and then honestly a bit more fragile than I ever realized.
Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing when you actually stop and think about it. I mean, the rules for how those all-important electoral votes are cast and counted, they're laid out in these old legal documents. And get this, there isn't even like a standardized form for those. Certificates of ascertainment that each state sends to Congress, each governor basically does their own thing, which feels kind of unnerving, when you realize how much actually rides on these pieces of
So
paper.
seriously, like imagine a presidential election coming down to like a typo on one of those certificates. I
Yeah.
mean, Congress did pass that Electoral Count Reform Act in 2022, right? After all that drama of the 2020 election. But is that really enough?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. The act was supposed to prevent these disputes by making it super clear what the vice president's role is in the process. So basically, they're trying to eliminate any room for someone to
Yeah.
interpret things their own way, which, as we've seen, can lead to chaos. But whether it's enough to actually prevent another January 6th situation, I mean, that's a debate that's it's still raging on.
Okay, so the system is, shall we say, a work in progress. But speaking of legal battles, let's jump to Trump's big win against ABC News. $15 million payout for one statement made during an interview. I mean, that's got to send shockwaves through newsrooms, right?
Yeah, this case is a total game changer for how the media can, or maybe can't, report on Trump. It highlights this super delicate tightrope they have to walk between, reporting the facts and avoiding any potential legal landmines. Like in this case, the difference between the terms sexual assault and rape under New York law, it was crucial. Even though the jury basically said what happened fit
Yeah.
the common definition of rape.
Wow, so it's all about these legal nuances. But those nuances can cost millions. That makes you wonder, is this a strategy by Trump to, basically intimidate media outlets into self-censoring, even if what they're reporting is, totally accurate?
It's a chilling thought, isn't it? This case definitely throws a wrench into the already super complicated relationship between Trump and the media, and it raises some serious questions about the future of press freedom here in the U.S.
Okay, so we've seen how the legal system might be used to silence critics, but let's shift gears a bit and talk about one of Trump's biggest campaign promises, ending birthright citizenship. I mean, this was a cornerstone of his platform, but the legal hurdles he would have to clear are massive.
Sure. You're talking about the 14th Amendment here, the one that explicitly says anyone born on U.S. soil is a citizen. It's basically the bedrock of American citizenship. Trying to change that is trying to move a mountain.
So is there any way Trump could realistically get around that?
A full repeal. Almost impossible. The process for amending the Constitution is designed to be super, super difficult. You need super majorities in both Congress and state legislatures. But, and this is where it gets tricky, Trump could try to chip away at it using executive orders.
Executive orders, what could those actually do?
Well, he could target things like passports, social security numbers, or even federal benefits for children of undocumented immigrants. It wouldn't be a clean break from the 14th Amendment, but it would definitely create a whole lot of chaos and legal battles.
So basically a legal battle that would probably end up at the Supreme Court.
Exactly. And it wouldn't be a quick process either. It could drag on for years with no guarantee of success. And let's not forget, if a Democrat wins the White House in 28, they could just reverse everything, making the whole fight kind of pointless.
Right.
Except, of course, for all the division and uncertainty it would cause in the meantime.
Which some might argue is exactly what Trump wants.
Yeah.
But let's step back from the legal maneuvering for a sec and talk about the American people themselves. Like, what's going on with the national mood right now? What do people actually want from their government?
This analysis from Jonathan Last over at The Bulwark, it really got me thinking. Last makes a really fascinating argument. He says that Trump's appeal isn't based on those classic Republican promises of a better economy or whatever. It's something much deeper, a desire for retribution, basically. It's about punishing enemies, both foreign and domestic. That becomes the main focus, not necessarily improving the lives of everyday Americans.
Yeah, reading that really resonated with me. It seems like people are tired of the same old political games, and Democratic pollster Molly Murphy seems to agree. She's warning that attacking Trump's character or saying he's breaking norms, it's not going to work anymore. People are disillusioned with the system. And they're less concerned with those things than they are with seeing, real results.
That's right. So the question becomes, how do you address those desires? Murphy suggests that Democrats need to focus on Trump's economic policies and how those policies actually affect everyday Americans.
So instead of saying Trump is bad, they need to say, these policies are hurting your wallet.
Exactly. Highlight how tariffs are, leading to higher prices, or how tax cuts are disproportionately benefiting the wealthy, not the average person.
It almost feels like we're talking about two completely different Americas here, each with their own values and priorities. And speaking of different Americas, it seems like what's happening at the state level is becoming just as important, if not more important than what's going on in Washington.
That's a really important point. State legislatures are becoming increasingly powerful, especially given the potential for gridlock in D.C., control over crucial issues like voting rights, education, and even healthcare is shifting to the states, and that has huge implications for all of us.
Right, like in Michigan, for example, Republicans flipped the state house in the 2024 election, breaking that Democratic trifecta and really throwing a wrench into the state government.
Michigan is a perfect example of how even a small shift in power can have massive consequences. We saw similar dynamics in Minnesota, where Democrats lost their supermajority in the House, making it way harder for them to get anything done.
So we're seeing this trend towards divided government at the state level, which could make the partisan battles we're seeing nationally even worse.
Yeah.
And it's not just about gridlock, is it? There's this whole wave of conservative policies being passed in red states, often going way beyond anything Trump himself has proposed.
Absolutely. It's a full-on policy blitz, especially on issues like voting rights, education, and social issues. Think of it like a testing ground for policies that could eventually go national.
Okay, so give me some examples. What are we talking about here?
Well, in Idaho, lawmakers want to allow teachers to carry concealed guns in schools and let parents sue schools and libraries for content they don't like.
Teachers with guns? That's terrifying.
It's definitely controversial. And then there's Oklahoma, which is trying to restrict abortion access even further and mandate the display of the Ten Commandments in public schools.
Okay, so those are pretty extreme examples. What about a big state like Texas?
Texas. They're planning to create their own border patrol and crack down even harder on undocumented immigrants.
And we can't forget about Florida, with Governor DeSantis leading the charge there.
Right. DeSantis is all about school choice policies, restricting transgender rights, and even teaching anti-communism in schools.
So it seems like it's not just about what's happening in D.C. anymore. It's about what's happening in our own backyards, in state capitals across the country.
That's exactly right. The balance of power is shifting, and understanding what's happening at the state level is crucial for understanding the future of American politics.
It's a lot to wrap your head around, and it feels like we're just scratching the surface. But speaking of people who are actively trying to reshape the political landscape, we have to talk about Cleta Mitchell and her election integrity network.
Mitchell, who was deeply involved in Trump's attempts to overturn the 2020 election, is now working with a group called ALE to push for even tighter voting restrictions.
Wait, ALEC?
What's that? You might not have heard of ALEs, but they're They're kind of a big deal. It's this powerful group of conservative lawmakers and corporations that actually writes model legislation. Think of it like a blueprint for red states to follow. And Mitchell is using their platform to push for some pretty radical changes.
Okay, so what exactly are they proposing?
Their agenda is extensive, to say the least. They want things like requiring documentary proof of citizenship to vote, limiting early voting periods, and making it much harder to challenge election laws in court.
It seems like these measures would
Yeah.
make it harder for people to vote, especially
Yes.
certain groups.
That's the concern. While they claim it's all about preventing non-citizen voting, critics argue the real impact would be to disenfranchise voters who
Right.
tend to vote Democratic.
So basically using election integrity as a cover
Ooh.
to suppress votes and hold on to power. That's pretty chilling.
It's definitely a controversial strategy, and it's part of a broader trend we're seeing across the country.
This feels like the tip of the iceberg. So where do we go from here? Stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive, where we'll explore the potential consequences of these trends and what they could mean for the future of American democracy.
You know, it's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day headlines and all that, but when you step back and look at the big picture, it's clear we're at a crossroads in American history, really. And the choices we make now, as individuals, as communities, as a nation, they're going to have like ripple effects for generations to come.
Yeah, it's kind of overwhelming when you put it like that. I mean, we've just scratched the surface of all the political maneuvering and the policy changes happening, and it already feels like a lot to process. So where do we even begin to unpack the potential consequences of all this?
Well, I think it's important to remember that these aren't just like abstract political battles. These decisions have they have real world impacts on people's lives. Take those state level policies we were just discussing. Imagine you're a parent in Idaho now, sending your kid to school where teachers might be carrying guns. Does that make you feel, safer
Sure.
or more anxious?
Honestly, that thought terrifies me. And what about those restrictions on abortion access in Oklahoma? How are those going to affect women's health care and their ability to make decisions about their own bodies?
Exactly. These policies have the potential to reshape the fabric of our society, really, from our schools and healthcare systems to our fundamental rights and freedoms, and the fact that they're often being enacted at the state level, where there's less national attention and scrutiny, makes it even more crucial that we pay attention to what's happening in our own communities.
Right. It's like a domino effect. You start chipping away at rights and freedoms in one state, and pretty soon it spreads across the country.
Yeah.
So what can we do about it? How do we push back against these trends?
Well, it starts with awareness. We can't fight what we don't see, right? So stay informed about what's happening at both the national and local levels. Read news from diverse sources, engage with local organizations, attend town hall meetings, and make your voice heard.
So it's not just about following the presidential race or the drama in Congress. We need to pay attention to our state legislatures, our city councils, our school boards, all the places where decisions are being made that directly impact our lives.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of your own voice. Contact your elected officials, write letters to the editor, organize with your neighbors. There's so many ways to get involved and make a difference.
I think it's easy to feel powerless in the face of such, big systemic issues. But you're right. We have to remember that change starts at the grassroots level. Okay, so we've talked about the importance of staying informed and getting involved. What else should people be thinking about as we navigate this new political landscape?
I think it's crucial to cultivate critical thinking skills. We're bombarded with information from all sides: news, social media, political ads, and it can be really hard to separate fact from fiction. Yeah, especially in such a polarized environment.
It's like we're living in an echo chamber where everyone just reinforces their own beliefs, and anything that challenges those beliefs is
automatically dismissed as fake news or propaganda.
Exactly. So be skeptical of everything you read and hear. Check sources, consider different perspectives, and be willing to change your mind when presented with new information.
Also, it's not just about like consuming information. It's about like actively engaging with it, questioning it, and forming our own informed opinions.
Precisely. And don't be afraid to have difficult conversations, even with people who hold different views. Listen with an open mind. Try to understand where they're coming from, and look for common ground.
Yeah, that's easier said than done, especially when the political climate feels so toxic. But you're right, we can't just retreat into our own little bubbles and demonize everyone who disagrees with us. That's not how we, solve problems or build a better future. Exactly. And remember, even in the face of all these challenges, there are also reasons for hope. We're seeing a surge in activism and civic engagement, especially among young people. They're demanding change, holding leaders accountable, and pushing for a more just and equitable society.
That's definitely encouraging. But let's not sugarcoat things. There are some serious threats to American democracy right now. We've talked about the erosion of norms, the attacks on the rule of law, and the efforts to suppress voting rights. How worried should we be?
I think it's important to be realistic about the dangers we face. These trends are alarming, and they have the potential to undermine the foundations of our democracy. But we can't give in to despair or apathy. We have to believe that change is possible and that our actions can make a difference.
So it's a balancing act. We need to be aware of the threats without becoming paralyzed by fear. We need to stay engaged without becoming overwhelmed by the constant barrage of news and information.
Exactly. It's a marathon, not a sprint, and it requires stamina, resilience, and a commitment to the long game. But I truly believe that the future of American democracy is worth fighting for.
Well said. And speaking of the future, let's shift our focus to some of the specific areas where these battles are playing out. We've already touched on voting rights, but education is another key battleground.
Absolutely. And it's not just about curriculum choices or textbook controversies. It's about the very nature of public education and its role in shaping the future of our democracy.
We're seeing this growing push for school choice, which essentially diverts public funds to private schools, often with religious affiliations.
And this is being framed as a matter of parental rights and freedom of choice. But critics argue that it undermines the principle of a common education system. It further exacerbates inequality, and it risks eroding the separation of church and state.
It's a deeply complex issue with strong arguments on both sides. But one thing's clear. The stakes are incredibly high. The future of American education and by extension, the future of American society hinges on these debates.
And the same can be said about healthcare, another area where we're seeing a stark divide between red and blue states.
Right. Republican-led states are pushing to restrict abortion access, while some Democratic-led states are trying to expand it. It's a fundamental question of bodily autonomy and reproductive rights.
It's a question that the Supreme Court has put squarely back into the hands of the states. We're now seeing a patchwork of laws across the country, with some states offering safe and legal abortion care, while others have effectively banned it altogether.
It's a deeply personal and emotional issue, and it's one that's likely to remain highly contentious for the foreseeable future.
And then there are the social issues like LGBTQ+ rights. Which have become increasingly politicized.
We're seeing a wave of legislation targeting transgender youth, particularly in red states.
From banning gender-affirming care to restricting participation in sports and even regulating bathroom access. These laws are being framed as protecting children.
But LGBTQ+ advocates argue that they're discriminatory, harmful, and based on fear and misinformation.
And the impact on these young people is devastating. They're being denied access to health care, ostracized from their peers, and subjected to a level of scrutiny and hostility that's simply unconscionable.
It's a truly heartbreaking situation, and it's a stark reminder of the cruelty that can result when political agendas trump basic human decency and compassion.
And the saddest part is these are just a few examples of the many fronts on which these battles are being fought. It can feel overwhelming trying to keep up with it all.
Right. It's a constant barrage of news, legislation, court cases, often with conflicting information and perspectives. It's easy to feel lost in the noise.
And that's why it's so important to cultivate reliable sources of information, to think critically about the narratives we're being presented with, and to engage in civil dialogue, even with those who hold different views.
It's about staying informed, staying engaged, and refusing to give in to apathy or despair.
Exactly, because the future of our democracy depends on it.
Well, speaking of staying informed, let's turn our attention back to the media and its role in covering these turbulent times. We've already discussed Trump's lawsuit against ABC News, but there are broader trends at play here.
Yes, the media landscape is more fragmented and polarized than ever before. We're seeing a rise in partisan outlets, the spread of misinformation,
Mhm.
and a growing distrust of traditional news sources.
Yeah, it's making it increasingly difficult to discern fact from fiction, to navigate the information overload,
Yeah.
and to have, constructive conversations about the issues that matter most.
And this is further exacerbated by the rise of social media, where algorithms often prioritize engagement over accuracy, creating these echo chambers where people are only exposed to information that reinforces their existing beliefs.
It's a real challenge.
Yeah.
Both for journalists trying to report the news responsibly, and for citizens trying to stay informed.
And it's a challenge that we need to address head on. We need to support quality journalism, promote media literacy, and hold platforms accountable for the spread of misinformation.
Because a healthy democracy requires a well-informed citizenry, and that means having access to accurate, unbiased information.
Absolutely. The media plays a vital role in holding power accountable, informing the public, and fostering a shared understanding of the challenges we face.
And in these turbulent times, that role is more crucial than ever.
Right. We need a media that is both vigilant and insightful, that can cut through the noise and provide us with the information. We need to make informed decisions about our future.
Speaking of the future, let's take a step back and consider the broader implications of these trends. We've talked about specific policies and political battles, but what does all of this mean for the long-term trajectory of American society?
That's a big question, and one that's difficult to answer with any certainty. But I think there are a few key themes that emerge from our discussion.
Yeah, first we're seeing a deepening of political polarization, with the two major parties becoming increasingly ideologically distinct and antagonistic.
This is making it increasingly difficult to find common ground, to compromise, and to govern effectively. It's leading to gridlock dysfunction and a sense of frustration and disillusionment among the electorate.
Second, we're seeing a rise in identity politics, with people increasingly defining themselves and their political allegiances based on their race, religion, gender, or other group affiliations.
This is creating a more fragmented and divided society where people are more likely to see each other as members of opposing tribes rather than as fellow citizens. It's making it harder to have civil conversations, to empathize with those who are different from us, and to find common ground.
And third, we're seeing a decline in trust in institutions. From government and the media to corporations and even religious organizations.
This is a dangerous trend because it erodes the foundations of a functioning society when people lose faith in the institutions that are supposed to serve them. They become more susceptible to conspiracy theories, extremism, and political manipulation.
And all of this is taking place against a backdrop of rapid technological change, globalization, and economic inequality. It's a complex and challenging landscape, and there are no easy answers.
But one thing is clear: the choices we make today will have profound consequences for the future. We need to be mindful of the forces at play, the stakes involved, and the long-term implications of our action.
And we need to remember that the future is not predetermined. It's something we create collectively through our choices, our actions, and our engagement.
Absolutely. We have the power to shape the future we want, but it requires awareness, commitment, and a willingness to work together.
Well, on that note, let's bring our discussion back to the present moment. We've talked about the big picture. Yeah. But what are some of the specific challenges and opportunities that we're likely to face in the coming months and years?
Well, one key area to watch is the Supreme Court, which has become increasingly conservative and activist in recent years. Right,
and with a 6-3 conservative majority, the court is poised to reshape American law and society on a wide range of issues,
from abortion and gun rights to voting rights and environmental regulations. The court's rulings will have far-reaching consequences.
And with a president who's likely to push the boundaries of executive power, we could see some major legal battles brewing.
Absolutely. The separation of powers, the rule of law.
Yeah.
and the very foundations of our of our democracy could be put to the test.
It's a sobering thought. But on a more positive note, there are also opportunities for progress.
Yes, despite the challenges we face, there are also reasons for hope. We're seeing a surge in activism and civic engagement, particularly among like
Young
the women.
people, and there's a growing recognition of the
Certainly.
need to address systemic inequalities, from racial injustice
Mhm.
to economic disparities.
And technology, while posing certain risks, also offers new tools for organizing, mobilizing, and amplifying voices that have traditionally been
So
marginalized.
it's a mixed bag, to say the least. But ultimately, the future of our democracy rests on our collective will, our commitment to its principles,
Yeah,
and our willingness to engage in the hard work of
yeah.
making it more just and equitable for all.
I couldn't have said it better myself. It's a time for both vigilance and hope, for both realism and idealism.
And it's a time for action. We
Mhm.
can't afford to sit on the sidelines and watch as events unfold. We need to be active participants
In
and
shaping the future we want.
exactly, because the future is not something that happens to us. It's something we create together.
Yeah.
Wow, we've really gone down the rabbit hole on this one. It's incredible to think how much has changed in just a few years,
Yeah.
and how much is still hanging in the balance. You know, when we started this deep dive into the 2024 election and what a Trump victory would actually mean, I had no idea how much it would connect to everything, from the courts to classrooms to even what's happening in my own state.
It is fascinating, isn't it, how seemingly isolated events or policies can like ripple outwards and create these chain reactions. We've talked about everything from, the mechanics of the Electoral College to the
Right.
power of state legislatures. And what it all boils down to is this. The future of America is being actively shaped right now. And we're all a part of that process, whether we realize it or not.
Right, and I think that's one of the biggest takeaways for me, the importance of being an informed and engaged citizen. It's easy to feel like our individual voices don't matter, but when you see how these seemingly small decisions at the state level or even local level can have such massive consequences, it really highlights the power we all hold.
It's like that old saying, think globally, act locally. We need to be aware of the big picture,
Yeah.
the national trends, the global forces at play. But we also need to be actively engaged in our own communities, our own states,
Wow.
holding our elected officials accountable and pushing for the changes we want to see.
Okay, so we need to be aware. We need to be engaged, and we need to be critical thinkers. But where do we even start? I mean, there's so much information out there, so many different perspectives. It's easy to get lost in the noise.
It can definitely feel overwhelming, but I think the first step is to be, you know, really intentional about the information we consume. We need to diversify our news sources, seek out different perspectives, and be wary of those echo chambers you mentioned earlier. We're only exposed to information that reinforces our existing beliefs.
So challenge ourselves to read something we disagree with. Listen to a podcast
Yeah.
that makes us uncomfortable. Talk to someone who sees the world differently.
Exactly. It's not about changing our minds necessarily, but it's about expanding our understanding, seeing the nuances, and realizing that the world is rarely black and white. And that kind of critical thinking, it's essential for
Yeah.
navigating this complex and constantly changing political landscape.
Okay, so diversify our news sources,
Mm.
engage in critical thinking, be active in our communities. What else can we do to ensure we're not just passengers
Mm.
on this wild ride, but active participants in shaping the future?
I think one of the most powerful things we can do is to focus on building bridges, not walls. The level of polarization in our society is alarming, and it's making it incredibly difficult to have meaningful conversations, to find common ground, and to solve problems together.
In preparing for this deep dive, I read so many articles and your opinions that were just dripping with animosity towards the other side. It's easy to get caught up in that us versus them mentality, but it's ultimately so destructive.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to remember that most people, regardless of their political beliefs, want the same basic things: a good life for themselves and their families,
Right.
a safe and healthy community, a future filled with opportunity. We may disagree on the best way to achieve those things, but that doesn't mean we can't have, respectful conversations, listen to each other's perspectives, and maybe even find some common ground.
It's about remembering that we're all human beings first and foremost, not political labels or ideologies.
Right, and that human connection, that empathy, it's the foundation for building a more just equitable and compassionate society.
Yeah.
It's what allows us to see beyond our differences and work together towards a common goal.
That's powerful, and I think it's a good reminder as we wrap up this deep dive to approach these complex issues with both our heads and our hearts. We need to be informed, engaged, and critical thinkers, yes, but we also need to be compassionate, empathetic, and open to dialogue.
It's a delicate balance, but I think it's the key to navigating these turbulent times and shaping a better future for ourselves and generations to come.
I couldn't agree more. Well, on that note, I think we've given you plenty to think about as you continue to explore these topics. The 2024 election, the rise of Trump, the shifting political landscape. Remember that this is just the beginning of the conversation.
Yeah. Stay curious, stay engaged, and never underestimate the power of your own voice.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep building those bridges.